My name is Fallon. I'm 34 and I own a successful freight brokerage in North Carolina. Last Tuesday, my father slammed my bank statement onto the breakfast table so hard coffee splashed across the paper. Then he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Either transfer every penny of your $800,000 to your sister today, or get out of my house. She deserves it more than you ever will." Those words hurt far more than any financial demand ever could. The man who raised me had just chosen my spoiled sister over me, and he expected me to smile while handing over everything I'd spent years sacrificing to build. I walked out without saying a single word. 3 hours later, police officers were standing on his front porch, and my family realized this fight had become something none of them had expected. But to understand how a quiet Tuesday morning exploded into that moment, you need to know what happened before I ever touched that front door. The air outside was crisp and chilly, smelling faintly of the incoming spring rain. The sky was painting itself in shades of deep gray and bruised purple, a heavy storm gathering on the horizon. I thought it was going to be just another quiet, productive Tuesday. I walked into the massive, pristine kitchen of the main house. The counters were gleaming marble, the appliances were brushed stainless steel, and the large bay windows let in the muted morning light. It was a beautiful space, a space that projected wealth and stability. I poured my coffee, enjoying the bitter, rich aroma filling the quiet room. Then Harlan walked in. My father. He did not say good morning. He did not ask how I was doing, or if my business was surviving the recent economic downturn. He just marched straight toward me, his heavy leather boots scuffing against the polished hardwood floor. His face was flushed with that familiar, arrogant red hue that always appeared when he felt he was losing control of a situation or when he was about to make a demand. He slammed a piece of paper down so hard my ceramic mug rattled violently against the wood, spilling dark drops of coffee onto the pristine surface. It was a private financial document from my primary bank. It was supposed to be delivered directly to my secure post office box downtown, but a clerical error at the local sorting facility had sent it to the main house address instead. Harlan had opened it. He had taken a letter clearly addressed to me, and he had torn through the sealed envelope without a single ounce of hesitation. He invaded my privacy just to snoop, just to see if he could find something to use to his advantage. Right there, printed in bold black ink, was the current balance of my primary high-yield savings account. $800,000. Every single penny of that money was earned through blood, sweat, and thousands of sleepless nights managing logistics and complex supply chains. It was my safety net. It was my future. It was the physical manifestation of my independence in a harsh world. Standing right behind Harlan was my mother, Blythe. She clutched the lapels of her expensive silk robe, her face twisted into an expression of exaggerated, dramatic distress. She always played the victim, the long-suffering matriarch who just wanted everyone to get along, provided getting along meant giving Harlan whatever he demanded. And leaning casually against the massive marble kitchen island was Maris, my younger sister, the golden child of the family. She was casually scrolling through her designer phone, not even bothering to look up at me, a smug little smile playing on her perfectly painted lips. Harlan pointed a thick, accusatory finger at the crumpled paper. "You have been hiding this from us." His voice echoed sharply against the high ceilings of the luxury kitchen, carrying a tone of deep betrayal, as if my personal success was a direct insult to him. "You sit out there in the guest house pretending you are just getting by, acting like you are struggling to make payroll, while you are hoarding nearly $1 million in secret. Your sister is drowning in debt. Her cosmetics company is on the verge of total financial collapse. She needs capital right now to fulfill her inventory orders, or the bank is going to seize her assets. You are going to transfer those funds to her business account today." I stared at him, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I looked at the man who was supposed to protect me, the man who was supposed to be my father, and I saw nothing but a greedy, desperate stranger. He thought that number on the paper was just free money. He did not see the countless hours of grueling labor, the immense stress of managing payroll for 30 employees, the sheer panic of delayed shipments, and the years of sacrificing my personal life. He just saw a convenient, immediate solution to Maris's endless cycle of failure. I did not raise my voice. I did not scream or cry. I took a slow sip of my coffee, feeling the bitter liquid burn the back of my throat. "Why were you opening my mail, Harlan?" I asked softly, keeping my tone steady and even. He scoffed loudly, waving his hand in the air as if my question was utterly ridiculous and beneath his notice. "Do not try to change the subject, Fallon. You live on my property. You sleep under my roof. You owe this family. We are not asking for a favor here. We are telling you what you are going to do." He thought the number on that paper was all I had to my name. He thought he possessed all the leverage in the world because I was currently staying in the smaller cottage. But he had no idea that the most valuable thing I owned was not sitting in a bank account on a piece of paper. It was sitting right underneath the soles of his expensive leather shoes. Will he ever realize the massive mistake he just made before it destroys his entire life? Looking at their expectant, demanding faces waiting for me to surrender my life savings, my mind instantly pulled me backward into the dark, dusty corridors of my past. This was not an isolated incident. This was merely the grand finale of a lifelong, toxic performance. To understand why I reacted the way I did, you have to walk through the museum of my pain. Every single exhibit in there was carefully curated by my own family, piece by piece, year by year. The first vivid memory hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I was 18 years old. I had spent all 4 years of high school working late nights at a greasy local diner, scrubbing sticky floors and flipping burgers to save up for my college tuition. I smelled like old frying oil every single day, but I did not care. I kept the cash hidden in a battered shoebox at the very back of my closet, pulling it out to count it every single Sunday night. I had saved exactly $12,000. It was enough to cover my entire first year at the state university, giving me the head start I desperately needed. I remember coming home one sunny afternoon, bursting with immense pride, holding a bank deposit slip in my hand, ready to secure my future. I ran up the stairs to my room. The shoebox was empty. I ran downstairs, my heart stuck firmly in my throat, panic clawing at my chest, only to find Harlan standing in the driveway, grinning from ear to ear. He was tossing a shiny set of keys to Maris, who was screaming in pure delight. Sitting in the driveway was a lightly used, bright red convertible. Harlan had taken my tuition money. Every single dollar I had scrubbed floors for. When I confronted him, sobbing and begging for a logical explanation, he just shrugged his broad shoulders as if he had borrowed $10 for lunch. Maris needed a safe, reliable car for her senior year of high school. Fallon. You are smart, you can just take out student loans. Family takes care of family. That was the exact day I learned that my hard work was only valuable if it could be spent on my sister. The second memory surfaced right after, carrying the bitter, lingering taste of rejection. I was 24. I had tried to start my very first business, a small local delivery service for medical supplies. I poured everything I had into it, maxing out 2 small credit cards. But the market shifted, a major hospital client went bankrupt without paying their invoices, and I lost everything. I came back to this very house, broken, exhausted, and terrified, looking for just a shred of maternal comfort. I found my mother, Blythe, sitting in the luxurious living room flipping through a fashion magazine. I sat beside her on the expensive sofa, tears streaming down my face, admitting out loud that I had failed and asking if I could stay in my old room for a month to get back on my feet. Blythe did not hug me. She did not pat my back or tell me it would be okay. She simply sighed, a long, tired sound that conveyed utter disappointment, and slowly turned the page of her magazine without even looking up at me. "Well, I hope you figure it out quickly, Fallon. We really cannot have you becoming a burden on the family finances right now. Maris is applying to expensive private colleges, and we need to focus all our available resources on her future. Do not make this harder on your father." I packed a single suitcase that same night and slept in the back seat of my rusty sedan for 2 weeks in a grocery store parking lot. I swore to myself in the freezing cold that I would never ask them for anything ever again. And then came the third memory, the defining era of my adult life. I was 28. I had finally found my footing in the brutal, unforgiving world of freight brokerage. While girls my age were out partying, dating, or traveling the world, I was standing on freezing shipping docks in the dead of winter in Pennsylvania. I was drinking cheap gas station coffee at 3 in the morning, aggressively negotiating rates with hardened truck drivers, fighting for every single profit margin. I sacrificed my youth, my physical health, and my social life to build my logistics empire from the ground up, entirely alone. During those brutal, exhausting years, my family took luxury vacations to the Bahamas and Aspen. They posted thousands of photos of themselves sipping colorful drinks on pristine white beaches, funded entirely by Harlan's dwindling credit lines and risky commercial loans. They never once called to ask if I was warm. They never once asked if I was eating properly or if my business was surviving. They simply forgot I existed until I became successful enough to be useful. These memories were not just sad stories to cry over. They were the iron strikes on the anvil that forged my soul. They burned away my naive need for their validation and turned me into a cold, hardened piece of steel. Sitting at the table, looking at my father trying to steal my hard-earned future for a second time, I felt no sadness. I felt no heartbreak or betrayal. The fragile, hopeful daughter inside me had died a very long time ago in that freezing car. Now, there was only the business owner. And the business owner was looking at a hostile takeover attempt. These painful memories forged me into a dangerous weapon. And that weapon was about to drop right on their heads. Are they truly prepared for the monster they created? The heavy, suffocating silence in the kitchen was suddenly broken by the sound of Blythe starting to cry. It was her signature move, refined over decades of manipulation. Whenever Harlan launched a brutal verbal attack, Blythe provided the emotional artillery to make the target feel guilty. She stepped forward, dabbing at her dry eyes with a monogrammed tissue, her voice quivering with practiced theatricality. "Please, Fallon," she whimpered, reaching out a trembling hand toward my arm, though she did not actually touch me. "You have to understand the immense pressure Maris is under right now. Her cosmetics line is her dream. She has demanding investors breathing down her neck every single day. If she defaults on her manufacturing invoices, she will be ruined publicly. Her reputation will be destroyed. She has been crying for weeks in her room. I am so worried she might do something drastic if she loses everything she has built. We are begging you as a family. You have so much more money than you could ever possibly need. Why are you being so stubborn and selfish when your own flesh and blood is suffering?" I shifted my cold gaze from my mother to the so-called suffering victim. Maris was not crying. She did not look like a woman on the brink of a nervous breakdown. She was leaning gracefully against the marble counter, meticulously inspecting her freshly manicured nails. Her designer silk blouse and imported leather shoes probably cost more than my entire weekly payroll for my dispatch team. When she saw me looking at her, she did not look away. She offered a condescending, arrogant little smirk. "Honestly, Fallon, you are being ridiculous about this," Maris chimed in, her tone dripping with unearned arrogance and entitlement. "You have been living out there in the guest house for 6 months totally rent-free. You use the electricity, you use the hot water, you take up valuable space on our estate. Think of this cash transfer as paying your fair share of back rent. Besides, what are you even going to do with $800,000? You do not have a real life. You do not go anywhere fun. You wear the same boring suits every day. I actually have a major lifestyle brand to build. I need this capital to scale my business. It is an investment in the family name. An investment." She wanted to take my life savings, the money I bled for, to pay off massive debts for a vanity project that had never turned a single dollar of actual profit. She wanted to maintain her fake illusion of being a wealthy, successful influencer on social media, and she expected me to blindly fund it just because we shared the same last name. I placed my hands flat on the polished wooden table, feeling the cool grain beneath my palms. "I will not be transferring any money to anyone," I stated clearly, my voice devoid of any emotion, offering no room for negotiation. "My finances are my own private business. Do not ever open my mail again, or I will file a formal complaint with the postmaster." Harlan's face turned a dangerous, explosive shade of purple. The thick veins in his neck bulged visibly against his collar. He slammed his fist down onto the table for a second time, rattling the coffee mug so hard one almost tipped over. "You ungrateful little brat," he roared, stepping so close I could smell the stale mint and old coffee on his breath. "You do not get to sit there and dictate terms in my house. You think because you run some little trucking company you are better than us? You think your money makes you special? You are nothing without this family supporting you." He stood up straight, pulling his shoulders back, crossing his arms over his broad chest, projecting the ultimate image of an authoritarian patriarch. He was playing his final, most desperate card, the exact same card he had used to control his weak wife and his golden child for decades. The ultimate threat of total exile. "Here is the deal, Fallon," Harlan said, his voice dropping from a loud roar to a low, menacing growl that filled the quiet kitchen. "You have exactly 3 hours. 3 hours to wire that money directly into your sister's business account. If that money is not fully cleared by noon today, I want you off my property. I want you to pack your cheap little bags, hand over the keys to the guest house, and get out. You will never set foot on this land again. You will be entirely cut off from this family. 3 hours, Fallon. Do not test my patience." He turned his back on me, dismissing my presence wholly, and walked over to the large stainless steel refrigerator to pour himself a glass of orange juice. Maris giggled softly, picking up her heavy designer handbag from a nearby chair. She looked at me with a victorious, cruel glint in her dark eyes. "See you at noon, sis. Hope you pack fast." They left me sitting alone at the table. The tall antique grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, a heavy, rhythmic, metallic sound marking the countdown. Tick. Tock. 3 hours. He had just set a definitive timer for my destruction. But what Harlan foolishly failed to realize was that the ticking clock was not counting down to my eviction. It was counting down to his. Would he even see the massive explosion coming before it destroyed his entire world? I did not scream at the top of my lungs. I did not throw my ceramic coffee mug against the pristine white walls in a fit of rage. I did not drop to my knees on the hardwood floor and beg for mercy from a man who possessed none. I simply stood up, pushed my heavy wooden chair back into its proper place under the table, picked up the crumpled bank statement, and walked out the back door of the kitchen. The transition from the oppressive, heated, emotionally charged air of the main house to the cool, breezy morning outside was jarring. The sky above the North Carolina landscape was turning a bruised, violent shade of gray. A heavy, aggressive spring storm was rolling in fast, the air growing incredibly thick with the sharp scent of ozone, wet dirt, and crushed pine needles. The wind whipped through the branches of the ancient oak trees, mimicking the turbulent energy coursing through my own veins. It felt perfectly fitting for the day. I walked slowly and deliberately across the expansive, manicured green lawn toward the guest house. The property really was beautiful, a true testament to Southern luxury. 3 sprawling acres surrounded by tall, wrought iron fencing, a long winding asphalt driveway lined with expensive landscaping, and a pristine main house that looked like it belonged on the cover of an elite architecture magazine. The guest house where I had been staying was a smaller, cozy wooden cottage tucked neatly near the edge of the dense tree line. I had moved in 6 months ago because my own expensive downtown loft had suffered severe water damage from a burst pipe, and the extensive renovations were taking much longer than anticipated. Harlan had grandly offered me the space, acting like a benevolent king granting temporary shelter to a struggling peasant. As I walked, the wind carried the faint, distinct sound of laughter drifting from the open kitchen window behind me. Maris and Harlan were joking. They were celebrating their perceived victory. They truly believed they had me cornered and defeated. They thought I was walking back to my little cottage right now to cry into my pillow, to suffer a nervous breakdown, and to ultimately log into my secure banking portal to surrender my life savings. They relied entirely on the old, outdated family dynamic. Harlan commands with anger, and Fallon obeys out of a desperate fear of abandonment. But they had not factored in the immense evolution of my character over the last decade. The frightened, insecure young girl who slept in the back of her freezing car was dead and buried. The woman walking across the wet lawn right now was a seasoned executive who negotiated with ruthless corporate sharks and aggressive union leaders every single day. I did not operate on fear anymore. I operated on cold, hard leverage. I reached the front door of the cottage, inserted my brass key, and turned the lock. The heavy solid wood door clicked shut behind me, instantly sealing out the loud noise of the incoming thunderstorm and the toxic, grating laughter of my family. The interior of the cottage was perfectly quiet. It was neat and organized, filled only with my work laptop, towering stacks of business files, and a few basic changes of clothes. It smelled like fresh laundry detergent and strong coffee. It was my private sanctuary away from their madness. I walked over to the small kitchenette in the corner, poured the rest of my lukewarm coffee down the stainless steel sink, and washed the mug with deliberate, methodical movements. I was intentionally slowing my heart rate down. I was shifting gears from a betrayed, heartbroken daughter to a tactical CEO facing a hostile breach of contract. Harlan had given me a strict ultimatum: transfer the money or get off his property permanently. It was a bold, aggressive power move designed to shock me into immediate submission. It was exactly the kind of tactic a desperate, failing man uses when he has no real power but desperately wants to project strength to cover his own insecurities. I dried my hands meticulously on a clean cotton towel, draped it over the oven handle, and walked into the small, dimly lit bedroom. I did not pull a travel suitcase from the closet. I did not start folding my clothes or packing my toiletries. Instead, I dropped directly to my knees beside the bed, feeling the soft carpet beneath my legs. Harlan truly thought he was kicking me out of his house today. He thought he held the master keys to the entire kingdom. But he had forgotten the most important, fundamental rule of real estate and power. The king is only the real king if his legal name is actually printed on the deed. What dark, powerful secret was waiting patiently under my bed, ready to be unleashed? I reached my arm far under the heavy wooden frame of the bed, my fingers blindly searching until they brushed against the cold, unyielding surface of a heavy steel lockbox. I gripped the thick metal handle firmly and pulled it out into the light of the bedroom. It was a heavy-duty, fireproof safe, secured with a complex digital combination lock that only I knew. This box did not hold expensive jewelry, family heirlooms, or stacks of emergency cash. It held the structural, legal foundation of my entire current reality. I punched in the 6-digit code with rapid precision. The electronic lock beeped sharply, a crisp sound in the quiet room, and the heavy metal lid popped open with a soft hiss of escaping air. Inside, resting perfectly flat and pristine, was a thick, dark red legal folder. I lifted it out carefully, feeling the substantial, satisfying weight of the thick parchment paper inside. To fully understand the sheer magnitude of the catastrophic mistake Harlan had just made in that kitchen, you have to rewind the clock exactly 5 years. 5 years ago, I was just starting to see real, substantial profits from my freight brokerage company. I was quietly and diligently building my wealth, staying entirely under the radar of my demanding family. During that exact same time period, Harlan was actively and recklessly destroying his. He had made a series of disastrous, arrogant investments in commercial real estate strip malls. He leveraged everything he owned, including the family estate, to chase a massive, guaranteed payout that never actually materialized. The local real estate market crashed, his sketchy investments vanished overnight, and the massive commercial banks came collecting their dues. Harlan was drowning financially. He was literally weeks away from facing a total foreclosure. The bank was legally preparing to seize this beautiful 3-acre property, kick him to the curb, and auction it off to the highest bidder on the courthouse steps. Harlan and Blythe were facing the terrifying, humiliating reality of being thrown out into the street with absolutely nothing to their names. Harlan was way too proud to tell anyone he was failing, but I had a close friend who worked as a clerk at the county records office. She quietly tipped me off about the impending public auction of my childhood home. I could have easily let him fall. After the stolen college fund, the constant belittling, and the years of emotional neglect, he truly deserved to lose it all and face the harsh consequences of his arrogance. But some foolish, lingering part of my young heart still craved their parental approval. I desperately wanted to save my parents from ruin. So, I made a silent, massive financial move. I contacted the primary lending institution through an anonymous corporate LLC that I had set up specifically for my business assets. I hired a lawyer to negotiate directly with the bank executives on my behalf. I paid off Harlan's entire defaulted mortgage in one single, devastating lump sum. $600,000 in cold, hard, traceable cash. I bought the bad debt. I bought the sprawling land. I bought the massive house. When the bank sent Harlan a confusing, formal letter stating that his primary mortgage had been fully satisfied and the foreclosure proceedings were permanently canceled, he did not even question it. He arrogantly assumed it was a lucky clerical error in his favor, or that one of his sketchy investment partners had miraculously paid off the debt behind the scenes to save him. He never bothered to hire a lawyer to look into the finer details of the title transfer. He just went right back to living his lavish, arrogant lifestyle, fully believing he had outsmarted the banking system. He never knew that I was the one who signed that massive check. He never knew that the title deed to the entire estate had been quietly and legally transferred to an LLC that I solely controlled. He never knew that for the past 5 long years, he had been living rent-free in my house. I opened the red folder on the bed and stared at the crisp, legally binding documents. The official deed of trust with the county stamp. The property tax records, all paid diligently every quarter by my corporate accounts. The absolute legal proof that I owned every single blade of green grass, every single brick of the main house, and the very roof over his arrogant head. Harlan had just ordered me to get off his property. He had just threatened to throw me into the street like trash. A cold, dark smile slowly spread across my face, reaching my eyes for the first time all day. He wanted to play the role of the ruthless, unforgiving landlord. I was going to show him exactly what a real, legally binding eviction looked like. Who was I going to call to light the match that would burn his illusion to the ground? I left the red folder sitting open on the white bed sheets, the official county seals gleaming in the dim light, and picked up my cell phone. I scrolled past the endless text messages from logistics coordinators and demanding truck dispatchers, swiping down until I found a very specific, highly important name. Winslow. Winslow was not the kind of cheap, strip mall lawyer you hired to dispute a traffic ticket or handle a friendly neighborhood boundary dispute. He was a high-end, ruthless corporate real estate attorney. He was a silver-haired, sharp-suited shark who specialized in hostile corporate acquisitions, complex property litigation, and destroying people financially on paper without ever raising his voice. I had retained him 5 years ago to handle the complex, anonymous purchase of the estate from the bank, and we had remained good friends and business associates ever since. I hit the call button. The phone rang only twice before a smooth, deep voice answered. Fallon. What a pleasant surprise, Winslow said, sounding genuinely happy to hear from me. To what do I owe the pleasure of your call on this gloomy Tuesday morning? Do you need me to crush another warehouse leasing agreement for your expansion project? No, Winslow. I need you for something much more personal today, I replied, keeping my voice perfectly steady, stripping away any hint of the frightened daughter I used to be. I need to formally activate the emergency protocols on the residential estate property. The line went completely silent for a long, heavy moment. I could hear the faint sound of city traffic through his office window. When Winslow finally spoke again, all the casual, friendly warmth was gone from his voice, replaced instantly by the sharp, highly focused tone of a legal predator smelling fresh blood in the water. Did Harlan finally step out of line? He asked quietly. He just ambushed me in the kitchen an hour ago, I explained, pacing slowly across the small bedroom, my boots making soft thuds on the carpet. He intercepted and opened my private bank statements. He discovered my liquid business savings, and he aggressively demanded I transfer $800,000 to Maris to fund her failing cosmetics business. I heard Winslow let out a low, disgusted sigh, the sound of a man who dealt with human greed all day long. And what did he say when you naturally refused his absurd demand? He gave me a strict ultimatum. I said, stopping by the window to look out at the massive main house standing proudly in the rain. He told me I have exactly 3 hours to wire the money, or he is throwing me off the property permanently. He firmly believes he is evicting me from his land. A sharp, sudden bark of genuine laughter echoed through the phone speaker. Winslow was actually amused by the sheer stupidity of the situation. He actually tried to verbally evict the sole legal owner of the property? The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of that man is almost impressive in its delusion. I assume you are ready to drop the legal hammer on him? I am ready. I confirmed, my voice as cold as ice. Harlan just issued a direct verbal threat to illegally remove the registered property owner. He is currently occupying my house without a valid lease, without paying a single dime of rent for 5 years, and is actively attempting financial extortion. I want them gone, Winslow. I want the ultimate reality check delivered right to his front door today. Understood, Winslow said, the rapid clacking of his mechanical keyboard filling the background as he immediately went to work. Since there is no formal lease agreement in place, and they are now actively threatening the legal property owner with forced physical removal, they are officially classified as hostile squatters. I am drafting an emergency notice to vacate right now. We do not need a standard 30-day notice for hostile trespassers attempting financial extortion on the owner. How quickly can we move on this? I asked, watching the dark rain clouds finally break open, sending heavy, driving sheets of water washing over the estate lawn. I have the county sheriff on speed dial for tense situations exactly like this, Winslow replied smoothly, his tone brimming with professional confidence. The local authorities do not take kindly to squatters threatening legitimate homeowners, especially when extortion is involved. I will have the official legal documents printed, stamped by a judge, and ready to go in 20 minutes. I will pick up the sheriff on my way over to the estate. Winslow paused, the sound of his heavy commercial printer whirring to life in the background, churning out the paperwork that would end Harlan's reign. Fallon, listen to me closely. Once we serve these papers, there is no going back. The family dynamic will be permanently, irreparably destroyed. Are you fully prepared for the emotional fallout? I looked down at the red folder resting on the bed. I thought about the stolen tuition money that derailed my youth. I thought about the cold rejection when I failed my first business. I thought about the years of silent suffering while they partied on credit cards. There is no family dynamic left to destroy, Winslow. I said coldly, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over my shoulders. I will see you soon. I hung up the phone and tossed it onto the mattress next to the folder. The trap was set. The legal machinery was moving at full speed. Harlan had given me 3 hours to surrender my life. I only needed 45 minutes to take his entirely apart. What will happen when the flashing red and blue lights finally cut through the storm and illuminate his terrible mistake? We encourage viewers to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city they live in. Every comment helps the video reach a wider audience. Thank you very much. While I waited for Winslow and the local authorities to make their move, I needed to know exactly what was happening inside the main house. I walked over to my small wooden desk, opened my laptop, and typed in a secure IP address. The screen blinked black for a fraction of a second before dividing into 4 crystal-clear, high-definition video feeds. When I first purchased the estate anonymously 5 years ago, one of my very first acts as the new owner was upgrading the entire property's security system, including discrete indoor cameras in the common areas. Harlan and Blythe thought I had just hired a cheap alarm company to fix the old sensors. They had no idea I held administrative access to the entire network. The atmosphere inside the main house was electric with a sickening, victorious energy. It was a masterclass in unearned arrogance and toxic family drama. I clicked on the feed for Harlan's extravagant study. He was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, a desk he had bought during his fleeting years of success, holding a crystal glass of expensive amber scotch. It was barely 10 in the morning, but he was already drinking to celebrate his perceived ultimate victory. He had his phone pressed to his ear, loudly boasting to one of his country club friends. "Yeah, Bob, it is just a minor liquidity event," Harlan bragged, his voice booming through my laptop speakers, dripping with fake humility. "I am pulling some capital from a lazy family asset today. About $800,000. Going to inject it straight into Maris's lifestyle brand. The kid is a visionary, you know? Just needed a little seed money from the old man to get her over the hump. We are looking at massive returns by the fourth quarter." I felt a cold wave of pure disgust wash over me. A lazy family asset. That was how he viewed me. That was how he viewed my grueling, sleep-deprived years building a freight logistics company from nothing. I was not a daughter. I was a dormant bank account waiting to be plundered. He was already spending my money in his head, entirely convinced that his brutal 3-hour ultimatum had broken my spirit. I switched the audio over to the main living room feed. Maris was putting on a sickening performance of her own. She had dragged a massive ring light into the center of the room, illuminating her perfectly contoured face. She was running a live stream for her thousands of followers, acting like a brilliant entrepreneur who had just conquered the business world. "Oh my gosh, you guys, big things are coming so soon." Maris squealed into the camera, tossing her expensive hair over her shoulder. "I just had the most amazing morning meeting with my silent investors. We just secured an $800,000 cash injection to scale the brand. The new cosmetic palettes are going into production this week. It is just so validating to have people believe in your vision and hand you the capital you deserve. Hard work really pays off, you know?" She blew a kiss to the camera. Hard work. The sheer, unadulterated delusion of her words made my stomach churn. She had never worked a hard day in her entire 29 years on this earth. Her whole life was a carefully constructed facade funded by other people's sacrifices. She was using my bank statement, the one Harlan had illegally opened, to generate fake hype for a failing business that owed money to half the suppliers in the state. And then there was Blythe. My mother was visible in the background of the living room feed, lounging on the velvet sofa, sipping a mimosa. She looked incredibly relaxed, her dramatic tears from the kitchen entirely vanished. She was watching Maris with a look of profound, sickening pride. This was the family dynamic in its purest, most toxic form. They fed off each other's lies, constantly reinforcing their shared delusion that they were elite, untouchable, and entitled to everything they wanted. I sat there in the quiet of my small cottage, watching the three of them revel in their false victory. The rain outside was coming down in heavy, relentless sheets, lashing against the windows of my bedroom. The dark storm perfectly mirrored the immense storm of family revenge I was about to unleash upon them. They thought they had successfully navigated a minor bump in the road. They thought they had firmly put the rebellious, ungrateful daughter back in her proper place. I checked the digital clock in the corner of my laptop screen. It had been exactly 40 minutes since I hung up the phone with Winslow. The 3-hour countdown Harlan had so arrogantly imposed on me was ticking away, but the reality was that his time was already up. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the incoming rain seeping through the window frame. I felt a strange, profound sense of calm. For the first time in my 34 years, I was not afraid of their anger. I was not terrified of their rejection. I was the architect of their impending reality check. I kept my eyes locked on the live feed of the living room. Maris was still babbling to her followers about her fake manufacturing deals, and Blythe was pouring herself a second mimosa. They were so entirely consumed by their own vanity that they did not even notice the subtle shift in the atmosphere outside. But I noticed it. Through the heavy, rhythmic drumming of the rain, a new sound began to emerge. A sharp, piercing wail that cut through the gloom of the storm. Will they even understand what is happening when their perfect illusion shatters into a million jagged pieces? The piercing sound of police sirens tore through the quiet, affluent neighborhood, growing louder and more aggressive with every passing second. On my laptop screen, I watched the smug, victorious expressions on my family's faces instantly dissolve into utter confusion. Maris stopped mid-sentence during her live stream, her eyes starting toward the large front windows. Blythe froze with her mimosa glass halfway to her lips, spilling a few drops of orange liquid onto her expensive silk robe. In the study, Harlan dropped his phone onto his mahogany desk, cutting off his bragging friend mid-laugh. I could hear the heavy thud of his boots as he marched out of the study and into the grand foyer, demanding to know what the racket was about. I closed my laptop with a soft, satisfying click. It was time. I picked up the thick, dark red legal folder from the bed, tucked it securely under my waterproof jacket to protect the vital documents from the storm, and stepped out the front door of the cottage. The cold rain instantly hit my face, but I barely felt it. My blood was running hot with the adrenaline of impending justice. As I walked across the saturated lawn toward the main house, I saw two heavily marked county sheriff cruisers turn sharply into the long asphalt driveway. Their tires kicked up massive sprays of muddy water as they tore through the pristine landscaping. The flashing red and blue lights painted the front of the luxury estate in frantic, chaotic colors, cutting through the dark gray gloom of the storm. Right behind the cruisers was a sleek, black luxury sedan. Winslow had arrived. The vehicle skidded to a halt directly in front of the massive oak double doors. The doors of the cruisers popped open, and 4 uniformed deputies stepped out into the pouring rain. They looked stern, imposing, and entirely unamused by the weather. Winslow stepped out of his black sedan, holding a large black umbrella over his immaculate gray suit, looking like an executioner arriving for a scheduled appointment. Before the officers could even reach the stone steps of the porch, the heavy front doors swung violently inward. Harlan stood in the doorway, his chest puffed out, projecting that familiar, toxic aura of an angry patriarch whose domain had been disturbed. He looked at the flashing lights, then at the deputies, and his face twisted into a snarl of righteous indignation. "What is the meaning of this?" Harlan roared over the sound of the driving rain, stepping out onto the covered porch. "Are you looking for someone down the street? You are tearing up my driveway with your tires." The lead sheriff, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a face carved from granite, did not flinch at Harlan's booming voice. He walked calmly up the stone steps, stopping just a few feet away from my father. "Are you Harlan?" The sheriff asked, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that carried undeniable authority. "Yes, I am the owner of this estate," Harlan snapped back, crossing his arms aggressively. "And I demand to know why you are disrupting my property." Before the sheriff could correct his massive delusion, Harlan's eyes darted past the officers and landed on me. I was walking up the final few steps onto the porch, my jacket dripping wet, holding the red folder firmly in my hand. Harlan's expression shifted from annoyance to a cruel, triumphant sneer. He actually thought he understood what was happening. He thought he had the upper hand. "Oh, I see what this is," Harlan sneered, pointing a thick finger directly at my chest. "You called the cops because you were throwing a childish tantrum over being kicked out. Well, officer, you can go ahead and arrest her right now. I gave this ungrateful brat an order to vacate my premises, and she is refusing to leave. She is officially trespassing on my property. Take her away." Blythe and Maris had crept out into the foyer, hovering just behind Harlan like frightened birds. Maris was holding her phone, still recording, likely thinking this would be great drama for her followers. She actually smiled when Harlan demanded my arrest. The sheriff looked at Harlan's pointing finger, then slowly turned his head to look at me. He did not reach for his handcuffs. He did not step toward me. Instead, he looked back at Harlan with an expression of profound, chilling pity. "Sir, I strongly suggest you lower your voice and step back," the sheriff commanded, his tone devoid of any warmth or patience. "We are not here to arrest this young woman for trespassing." Harlan blinked, his arrogant facade slipping just a fraction of an inch. "What do you mean?" "I just told you, she does not have a lease. This is my house. I want her gone." I stepped forward, moving until I was standing shoulder to shoulder with the towering sheriff. I looked my father dead in the eyes. The fear that used to paralyze me in his presence was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, surgical precision. "You are right about one thing, Harlan," I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the rain, steady and unrelenting. Someone is definitely going to be arrested for trespassing today if they refuse to leave. But you made a very critical error in your calculations. I did not call the police to throw a tantrum. I called them to protect my property from hostile invaders. Harlan stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. What are you babbling about? He spat, though his voice lacked its previous booming confidence. Winslow stepped up onto the porch, shaking the rain from his black umbrella. He smoothly positioned himself next to me, opening his sleek leather briefcase. He looked at Harlan with the detached, analytical gaze of a man about to dissect a very small, very annoying insect. Will he survive the brutal truth that is about to be dropped on his head? Winslow cleared his throat, a sharp, professional sound that instantly commanded the attention of everyone on the porch. He did not look at Blythe, who was trembling in her silk robe, or at Maris, who had finally lowered her phone. He locked his predatory gaze directly onto Harlan. My name is Winslow. I am a senior partner in corporate real estate law, and I represent the sole legal owner of this estate, Winslow announced, his voice smooth, resonant, and dripping with undeniable authority. And the woman standing beside me, your daughter Fallon, is my client. Harlan let out a forced, breathy laugh, shaking his head in stubborn denial. What kind of sick joke is this? I bought this house 20 years ago. My name is on the mortgage. Not anymore, Harlan. Winslow replied, his tone turning razor-sharp. He reached out and took the dark red folder from my hands. He opened it deliberately, pulling out the crisp, heavy parchment documents bearing the official gold seals of the county clerk. 5 years ago, you defaulted on your commercial loans. The primary lending institution initiated foreclosure proceedings to seize this exact property. You were exactly 2 weeks away from being thrown out onto the street with zero equity. Harlan's face began to lose its color. The angry, flushed red drained away, leaving a sickly, pale gray in its wake. He swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically toward the heavy documents in Winslow's hands. My client stepped in through an anonymous corporate entity, Winslow continued, twisting the metaphorical knife with surgical precision. She paid off your entire defaulted debt in one lump sum. She paid $600,000 in cash to purchase the bad debt, and she legally transferred the title deed of this entire 3-acre estate into an LLC that she solely controls. You do not own this house, Harlan. You do not own the grass. You do not own the driveway. For the past 5 years, you have been living here entirely at the silent, generous mercy of the daughter you just tried to extort. The heavy, crushing reality of Winslow's words hung in the damp air. The shocking numbers echoed on the porch. I had paid $600,000 for the house. My liquid savings were $800,000. The logistics business I built from scratch was valued in the millions. My net worth was well over $2 million. And Harlan had arrogantly treated me like a desperate freeloader. Harlan physically stumbled backward. His knees literally buckled beneath his weight, and he had to grab onto the heavy brass handle of the front door just to keep himself from collapsing onto the porch. His mouth hung open, but no words came out. The authoritarian patriarch, the man who had terrified and controlled me for 3 decades, was instantly reduced to a weak, trembling shell. No, Blythe suddenly shrieked, pushing past Harlan. She lunged forward, her hands clawing desperately at the air, trying to snatch the official deed out of Winslow's hands. That is a lie. That is our house. We raised our family here. You cannot just steal our home with fake papers. The lead sheriff immediately stepped in front of Winslow, using his massive frame to block Blythe's frantic advance. Ma'am, do not touch the attorney, the sheriff warned, his hand resting casually but meaningfully on his heavy utility belt. These documents are verified and legally binding. We ran the title search before we drove out here. Your daughter is the sole legal property owner. You are currently occupying her home without a valid lease agreement. The sheer humiliation of the moment was profound. The neighbors in the adjacent luxury estates were undoubtedly watching the flashing police lights through their windows. The family drama was no longer a secret contained within these walls, it was a public spectacle of their own making. I looked at Harlan, who was still clinging to the door handle, hyperventilating. 3 hours ago, you stood in my kitchen and gave me an ultimatum, I said, my voice cold and echoing off the stone walls. You told me I had 3 hours to transfer my life savings to fund Maris's fake cosmetics company, or I had to pack my bags and get off your property. I took a step closer, invading his personal space, making sure he felt the immense, crushing weight of my presence. Well, Harlan, the 3 hours are not up yet. But the rules of the game have officially changed. You tried to rob me blind and throw me to the curb. So, I am returning the favor. Winslow pulled a single, crisp white sheet of paper from the back of the red folder and held it out toward Harlan. This is an emergency notice to vacate, Winslow stated flatly. Because you issued a verbal threat of illegal eviction against the legal owner and attempted financial extortion, you have forfeited any standard tenant rights. You are hostile trespassers. You have exactly 1 hour to gather whatever personal belongings you can carry in your hands, and you must vacate this property immediately. Harlan stared at the white paper as if it were a venomous snake. 1 hour? He whispered, his voice cracking, sounding like a terrified, broken old man. We cannot pack a 20-year life in 1 hour. We have nowhere to go. I felt absolutely zero pity. My heart was a locked vault. That sounds like a logistics problem, Harlan, I replied coldly. And I only solve logistics problems for paying clients. Will the golden child finally realize her endless free ride has violently crashed into a brick wall? The heavy silence that followed the delivery of the eviction notice was suddenly shattered by a high-pitched, hysterical scream. Maris had finally processed the catastrophic information. Her perfect, manicured world was collapsing, and her brain simply could not handle the sheer magnitude of the reality check. Her fake internet persona instantly vanished, replaced by a feral, unhinged rage. You bitch! Maris shrieked, her face contorting into a mask of pure, ugly fury. She threw her expensive designer phone hard against the stone wall of the porch, shattering the screen into 1,000 pieces. You planned this. You lied to us for 5 years just so you could humiliate us. You have millions of dollars and you are going to let my business fail? You are going to put our parents on the street? You are a monster. She did not just yell, she physically lunged at me. Her hands were raised, her perfectly filed nails aiming right for my face. I braced myself for the impact, fully prepared to defend myself, but the blow never landed. Before the sheriff could even react to pull her back, a massive, calloused hand shot out from the side of the porch and grabbed Maris firmly by the shoulder, spinning her around and halting her attack instantly. That is enough out of you, little girl. A booming, gravelly voice thundered. I looked over and felt a brief, genuine wave of relief. It was Uncle Thatcher, Harlan's younger brother. I had sent him a quick text message an hour ago that simply read, "It is happening." Thatcher was the exact opposite of Harlan. He was a retired mechanic, a man who worked with his hands, possessed zero pretension, and was the only member of my extended family who had ever actually supported my ambitions. He had driven his beat-up truck through the storm the moment he got my text, walking up the steps just in time to intercept the golden child's meltdown. Thatcher shoved Maris back toward her father. She stumbled, looking utterly shocked that anyone in this family dared to lay a hand on her. Do not you dare touch her, Thatcher. Harlan weakly protested, trying to muster a shred of his former authority. Shut your mouth, Harlan, Thatcher barked, pointing a thick, grease-stained finger right at his brother's pale face. I have watched you coddle this spoiled brat for 29 years while you treated Fallon like absolute dirt. You stole her college money. You ignored her struggles. You lived like a fake king in a castle you did not even own, burning through credit cards to impress people who do not care about you. And now you have the utter audacity to try and steal her hard-earned business money? You are a pathetic excuse for a father. Maris began to hyperventilate, tears of pure rage streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. I need that money, she wailed, stomping her expensive shoe on the stone porch like a toddler denied a toy. My investors will sue me. I will go to jail. You have to give me the $800,000, Fallon. It is not fair. The lead sheriff had seen enough. He stepped forward, pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt with a sharp, metallic clink. "Ma'am, you just attempted to physically assault the property owner in front of 4 sworn law enforcement officers," the sheriff said, his voice entirely devoid of sympathy. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." "What?" "No," Maris gasped, her eyes going wide with genuine terror as the officer grabbed her wrist. "You cannot arrest me. I am an influencer. I have brand deals." The sheriff easily twisted her arms behind her back, the handcuffs clicking securely into place. "I am not taking you to jail today, but you are going to sit in the back of my cruiser in these cuffs until you calm down and realize you are not in charge here." The sheriff forcefully guided a sobbing, struggling Maris down the wet steps and stuffed her into the back seat of the police vehicle, slamming the door shut. The visual of the untouchable golden child sitting in the back of a police car, her makeup smeared, screaming behind soundproof glass, was the ultimate form of family mocking. Her entire fake empire had crumbled in a matter of seconds. Blythe was sobbing uncontrollably now, sliding down the doorframe until she was sitting on the wet stone porch, burying her face in her hands. Harlan looked around wildly, realizing that every single avenue of escape had been firmly closed. His brother despised him, his golden child was handcuffed, the police were enforcing his eviction, and the daughter he thought he could bully was the one holding the executioner's axe. Harlan's legs finally gave out. He dropped heavily to his knees right there on the wet porch. The water soaked through his expensive trousers. He looked up at me, his face completely broken, the arrogant patriarch entirely erased. "Fallon, please," Harlan begged, his voice a pathetic, trembling whisper. "I am sorry. I was wrong. I was just stressed about money. Please do not do this. Do not throw us out into the storm. I am your father. Blood is thicker than water. You cannot put your own family on the street." I looked down at the man kneeling in the rain, offering apologies only because he had lost his power. Will his desperate tears wash away 3 decades of relentless emotional abuse? Blood is thicker than water. It was the ultimate, desperate battle cry of toxic families everywhere. Whenever they pushed you to the absolute brink, whenever they stole from you, lied to you, or broke your heart, they always threw that phrase in your face to demand unearned loyalty. I stared down at Harlan, kneeling in the puddles on the porch, his expensive clothes soaked, his dignity entirely shattered. I felt the immense power shift settle firmly into my bones. The dynamic was completely and permanently altered. He was no longer the imposing father figure. He was just a desperate, broken man facing the brutal consequences of his own lifelong greed. "You want to talk about blood, Harlan?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet, slicing through the sound of the rain. "Where was that blood loyalty when you stole my $12,000 to buy Maris a car? Where was that blood loyalty when you let me sleep in a freezing sedan because I was an inconvenience to your luxury lifestyle? Where was it 3 hours ago when you ordered me to empty my bank account or get out of my home?" Harlan choked on a sob, lowering his head until his chin touched his chest. "I was trying to save Maris," he whimpered weakly. "No," I corrected him sharply. "You were trying to save your own ego. You wanted to keep playing the wealthy savior for her, and you were perfectly willing to destroy my entire future to do it. You did not care if my company went bankrupt. You did not care if I lost everything I bled for. You just wanted her to stop crying so you could go back to pretending you were a successful patriarch." Winslow tapped his expensive wristwatch, his expression utterly merciless. "You have 45 minutes left, Harlan," the lawyer stated. "I strongly suggest you stop crying on the porch and start finding some garbage bags. If you are not off this property by the deadline, the officers will physically remove you, and you will leave with nothing but the wet clothes on your back." Harlan slowly dragged himself up from the ground, his joints popping, looking 10 years older than he had just an hour ago. He reached down and grabbed Blythe by the arm, hauling her up from the wet stone. Blythe was practically catatonic, her makeup running in dark streaks down her cheeks, muttering incoherently about her expensive china sets. They stumbled through the heavy wooden front doors, retreating into the house to desperately pack the remnants of their fraudulent lives. The next 45 minutes were a masterclass in profound humiliation. I stood on the porch with Thatcher and Winslow, watching the chaos unfold. The sheriff unlocked Maris from the cruiser, strictly warning her that one more outburst would result in a trip to the county jail. She sprinted into the house, sobbing hysterically. Through the large bay windows, I watched them scramble. They did not have an expensive moving company carefully wrapping their furniture. They did not have luxury leather trunks. Harlan was frantically pulling heavy black plastic trash bags from under the kitchen sink. They were running through the massive house, wildly throwing clothes, basic toiletries, and a few valuable knickknacks into the cheap plastic bags. They were arguing bitterly. I could see Harlan screaming at Maris to hurry up, blaming her for the entire disaster. Maris was screaming back, trying to carefully pack her designer shoes while her father demanded she grab practical items. The beautiful, unified family front they projected to the world had violently turned on itself the exact second the money ran out. They were tearing each other apart like starving wolves. As the deadline approached, the front doors opened. Harlan walked out first, dragging 2 heavy trash bags across the pristine hardwood floor, the plastic tearing and leaving a trail of socks and expensive ties behind him. Blythe followed, clutching a jewelry box to her chest like a life preserver. Maris brought up the rear, struggling with 3 oversized bags, crying loudly because the rain was ruining her silk blouse. They dragged their pathetic pile of belongings to the edge of the porch, looking out at the long, winding asphalt driveway. "Where's your car, Harlan?" Uncle Thatcher asked, a dark, mocking grin on his face. Harlan looked away, profound shame coloring his cheeks. "The lease was up last week. The dealership came and picked it up. We were supposed to go lease a new one this afternoon." "And Maris's car?" Thatcher pressed, thoroughly enjoying the interrogation. "I pawned the title for a short-term business loan," Maris mumbled through her tears, staring at the wet pavement. "They repossessed it 3 days ago." "So, you have no cars," Thatcher stated, shaking his head in sheer disbelief. "You were literally banking on stealing Fallon's money today to bail yourselves out of total financial ruin. You are all pathetic." They stood there on the edge of the porch, 3 wealthy imposters reduced to holding garbage bags in the pouring rain, with absolutely no vehicle to carry them away. They were forced to face the longest, most humiliating walk of their entire lives. Will the cold reality of the streets finally teach them the lesson they so desperately need to learn? The sheriff stepped forward, shining a heavy black flashlight toward the end of the long, winding driveway leading out to the main road. "The 1-hour deadline has officially expired. It is time for you to leave the premises. Start walking." Harlan hesitated, looking out into the heavy, driving rain. "You expect us to walk all the way down to the main road in the storm? With all these bags? How are we supposed to call a cab out there?" "That is not our concern, sir," the sheriff replied, unyielding. "You are trespassing. Move. Now." With no other options left, Harlan hoisted one of the ripped trash bags over his shoulder. He stepped off the covered porch and out into the torrential downpour. The heavy rain instantly flattened his gray hair against his skull. Blythe followed, whimpering loudly as her expensive slippers soaked through in the muddy puddles. Maris struggled the most, dragging her bags across the wet asphalt, sobbing as her designer lifestyle literally washed away into the gutters. I stood on the wide wooden porch, safely shielded from the storm, and watched them walk away. It was a long driveway, over a quarter of a mile. I watched the 3 of them trudge slowly through the rain, looking like weary refugees fleeing a disaster they had entirely created themselves. They did not look back. Not even once. They just kept their heads down, carrying their garbage bags, until they finally disappeared through the large wrought iron gates at the end of the property. The heavy, oppressive weight I had carried in my chest for my entire life instantly vanished. The physical act of watching them leave my land was the most profound, cleansing experience I had ever felt. The toxic tumor had been surgically removed. Winslow closed his briefcase with a sharp snap. "Well, Fallon, the property is officially secured," the lawyer said, offering a rare, genuine smile. "I will have my office file the finalized trespass injunctions by tomorrow morning. If they ever step foot on this grass again, they will be immediately arrested. Enjoy your house. Thank you, Winslow, I said, shaking his hand firmly. For everything. The police cruisers slowly backed out of the driveway, their lights turning off as they merged onto the main road. Thatcher lingered for a few more minutes, patting me heavily on the shoulder. You did the right thing today, kid, he said warmly. Do not ever let anyone tell you otherwise. They made their bed. Now they get to sleep in the mud. Thatcher walked down to his beat-up truck, gave a quick honk of the horn, and drove away. I was finally completely alone on my estate. I turned the heavy brass handle and pushed the massive oak front doors open. I stepped into the grand foyer of the main house. The space was a total mess. Discarded clothes, ripped packing tape, and muddy footprints covered the pristine floors. The remnants of their frantic, desperate exit were everywhere. But underneath the superficial dirt, the structural foundation of the house was rock solid. I walked slowly through the massive rooms, listening to the quiet. There was no screaming. There was no emotional manipulation. There was no lingering threat of extortion. There was just the gentle, rhythmic sound of the rain tapping against the large glass windows. I walked into the kitchen, the exact spot where Harlan had ambushed me just 3 hours ago. The crumpled bank statement was still lying on the floor where it had fallen during the chaos. I picked it up, smoothed out the wrinkles, and looked at the number again. $800,000. It was no longer a target for thieves. It was a monument to my resilience. I had survived their neglect, I had survived their financial sabotage, and I had built an empire they could never touch. I spent the next 2 weeks hiring professional cleaning crews to scrub every single inch of the main house. I had the locks changed, the security system upgraded again, and I finally moved out of the small guest cottage and into the master suite of my own home. I expanded my freight brokerage, securing 3 massive new national contracts, pushing my net worth even higher. I heard through Thatcher that Harlan and Blythe were currently living in a cramped, cheap apartment on the bad side of town, drowning in debt, while Maris was working a minimum-wage retail job at the local mall after her investors sued her for fraud. The universe has a remarkably consistent way of balancing its own ledgers. Some people might hear my story and judge my actions harshly. They might argue that a daughter owes her parents endless grace, regardless of how terribly they treat her. They might say that calling the police and legally throwing my own flesh and blood out into a violent thunderstorm to walk the streets with garbage bags was incredibly cruel and vindictive. They might think I went too far by completely destroying them when I had millions in the bank. But I firmly believe that respect is earned, not automatically granted by DNA. They viewed me as a disposable asset. They demanded my life savings and threatened to make me homeless. I simply let them read the fine print of the contract they did not know they signed. I protected my boundaries and I protected my future. But I am genuinely curious to hear what you think about this situation. If your own family ambushed you, illegally opened your mail, and gave you a 3-hour ultimatum to surrender your life savings or face eviction from your own home, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven them and tried to find a peaceful compromise? Or would you have dropped the legal hammer and watched them walk away in the rain with garbage bags? Let me know your honest thoughts down in the comments section below. Was my ruthless retaliation justified, or did I cross the line by treating my own parents like hostile criminals? I read every single comment, and I love seeing the debate. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate family revenge, please make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story. Sharing your own experiences in the comments helps others who might be dealing with toxic family members realize they are not alone. Thank you so much for watching. Stay strong, protect your peace, and I will see you in the next video.